Imagine discovering a secret that shatters your world. Hidden conversations, questionable promises, and a love you thought was unbreakable. My name is Peter, and what I overheard changed everything I believed about my marriage. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's a fight for respect, family, and dignity. Stay tuned to uncover how I uncovered the truth, and how I decided to take a stand that would redefine my future. I overheard and found myself becoming the subject of discussion. My name is Peter Cranston. I am 36 years old and have been married. To my wife Joy for 12 years, we have a girl and a boy, Bethany age 6, and John age 8. I work as a foreman for Benson Builders supervising carpenters, and am a master carpenter by trade. Joy works part-time as a receptionist at a local urgent care clinic. She works 9 to 2 on weekdays so she can be home by the time John and Bethany get home from school. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was working on our washing machine in the basement. I took it apart and realized I needed a part. I picked up the phone to call the local appliance center to see if they had the part in stock. As I picked up the phone, I heard Joy talking to Celeste. Celeste was a woman she worked with at the urgent care center. According to Joy, Celeste was recently divorced. She tried to get Joy to join her at their bachelorette party, which they had every Friday. Joy politely declined several times. Friday night was our family night, where we all sat down to dinner, made plans for the weekend, and reconnected with each other. We both agreed that family time was very important and should not be encroached upon. I always declined invitations to poker ball games and other events if they fell on a Friday. I had intended to decline, but I overheard Celeste talking and decided to listen. Listen because she was trying hard to get Joy to come the following Friday, and I was curious about what she proposed to entice Joy and what the itinerary was for these girls' nights out. What she told me was shocking. As I listened, Celeste said, "Come on, Joy, you deserve some fun and a break from the dull and dreary routine you call life. Besides, from what you told me about old Pete, you could use a little thrill. Why settle for little Peter?" It wasn't so much what Celeste said that surprised me, but how Joy reacted to it. I heard my loving wife giggle into the phone and replied, "Celeste, I told you that in confidence he is my husband, and I do love him even if he doesn't quite live up to his name. You say it's so much fun to just dance and let your hair down on Fridays. I've decided to join you this coming Friday to see it for myself. But only once." Celeste added, "Honey, you'll have so much fun that once you go with us, you'll never want to stop going again." They both giggled and hung up. I wondered why Joy had made me the subject of discussion. The implication that I was missing something really hurt. Did she really think I was too small? Was I satisfying her at all? And most importantly, why had she capitulated and agreed to go out with Celeste on Friday without even discussing it? I remembered why I had my phone in my hand and called the appliance store. They had my item. I told Joy where I was going and went to get the part. When I got home, I finished the repair and headed to the shower. To clean up while I was in the shower, I decided to preempt their plans for Friday after getting out of the shower. I wiped myself dry, called my sister Nancy, and arranged for her and her husband Rick to watch the kids for the weekend. I called and made reservations at a fancy French restaurant and bought 2 tickets for the touring company's production of The Phantom of the Opera. Having prepared my one and only attempt to make a preemptive strike and save my marriage, I decided that tomorrow I needed to prepare a contingency plan of action. While I fully intended to try to get my wife to come to her senses, I also realized that if she was willing to consider cheating on me and our marriage, I needed to be prepared for that scenario. I decided that I would be proactive if she contemplated cuckolding. I planned to divorce her cheating self, which included a scorched earth policy, and she would regret the day she gave up love for lust. I decided to take Monday off at work and get all my things in a row. I called Edgar Benson and told him what was going on in my life and why I needed a day, or maybe 2 off from work. John Big Swede Johansson would take over the team until my return. Big Swede was about 6'2" tall and weighed about 275 lbs of pure muscle. I knew people respected him, and the team was in good hands, big good hands. I met with Harrison Thornton, a real shark of a divorce lawyer. He advised me of my rights and what I could expect from the divorce. I paid him a fee and asked him to draw up the divorce papers and prenuptial agreement. I reasoned that if she decided to accompany me on Friday instead of going on a date, I would have a real heart-to-heart talk with Joy. I'd tell her what I already knew, get her signature on the prenup, and if she refused to sign, I'd hand her the divorce papers and be done with it. I also put a wiretap on our home phone and a recording app on her cell phone and spent the rest of the week monitoring her conversations. I planned to have a date night on Thursday after work. I wanted to give her a chance to pick us, but at the 11th hour to keep her from postponing the plan until the following week. I planned to leave the salvation or demise of our marriage in her hands. No ultimatums. I wanted her to genuinely prove to me that she wanted us, not promise. Some meaningless affair to satisfy lustful fantasies of bigger and better things if I am too inadequate to satisfy her sexual desires, even if only for one night. Then I am too inadequate to remain her faithful and loving husband, because if that is true, then she doesn't deserve to have me, and I deserve nothing less than her complete love, intimacy, and commitment to our marriage and our family. I remember when we were a young married couple just starting out, we went to an auction to see if we could get some good deals and found that the house was included in an estate sale program. It was a true marriage proposal. Apparently, the granddaughter of the elderly woman who owned it wanted to get rid of it and had held a fire sale to get rid of the structures and their contents. The house was old and dilapidated, but it had good bones. We are working class and sometimes have a hard time making ends meet, and saving money has proven even harder. We had just paid 20% of the hospital bill for John's delivery, and Joy had some minor complications that required a longer hospital stay. So financially, we were on a tear. I called Edgar and asked him to come over and look at the apartment. I was almost desperate, as I had not saved up much to buy this house when Edgar arrived. He took a thorough look at the old apartment. He agreed that the old lady had potential. He asked why I wanted him to inspect it. I replied that I wished I could afford to buy it, but I couldn't. I told him I thought he might be interested in it as an investment property. Edgar went to the auctioneer who was handling the sale, and the auctioneer put Edgar in touch with his granddaughter. Edgar was gone for about 3 hours. When he returned, he handed me an assignment deed with my name on it and told me I needed to sign some papers at a notary public. 15 minutes later, I was the owner of the house. Edgar wrote a check and paid cash. Edgar loaned me the money, and I was able to pay him through payroll deductions. I made the last installment on the previous payday. I spent all the spare money I had on renovations and remodeling, first to make it livable, and eventually to turn it into the home Joy. And I envisioned the bedrooms and living room were renovated first, then the plumb had to be upgraded and the electrical brought up to code during this time. Joy and little John were staying with her parents. My crew worked for pizza and beer and helped out. Then the new roof came on while we hosted Bethany the next year. New bathrooms were built. Then the driveway was repaved. Finally, I installed a new kitchen, and the latest appliances. All that was left was to install a new garage door. Fortunately, Edgar helped me purchase the materials. Cost price, thus I was cash poor but house. I drove an old work truck, so we only had Joy's 2-year-old minivan, which we had 3 more years to pay off. I learned that in the divorce I would have to pay her alimony and keep the house until the kids turned 18, or until she decided to remarry. At that time, she would be able to buy my share at current fair market value, or sell it, and give me half of the proceeds. Of course, child support and health insurance for children under 21, or until they become independent. Thus I had no tangible assets for her to hang on to. I was ready and waiting for her to tell me about her nefarious plans for Friday, but she never mentioned them. When Thursday evening came, I returned home as usual. However, as warned, I came home with flowers, a box of Norman Love chocolates I had shipped from Florida, and a bottle of Bergstrom Cumberland Reserve 2015 Pinot Noir wine from Oregon's Willamette Valley, to pair with the chocolates. She fell in love, no pun intended, with the chocolates from this quaint chocolate boutique. When we vacationed in Fort Myers a few years ago, I was fully prepared to go all out. But the question arose, did she? I walked into my den straight from the garage. She was in the kitchen, and while dinner was cooking, I had stashed goodies for the evening. We ate dinner and talked about our days. I helped John and Bethany with their schoolwork, and we enjoyed eating ice cream while watching TV at 8:30 p.m. Monsieur Joy gave the kids a bath, and I read them a story before bed. It was 8:50 p.m. when I Came down the stairs. I made my way to the kitchen and got a corkscrew, 2 wine glasses and a vase that I filled with water. I set them on a large serving tray and walked into the den. I placed the tray on my desk. I placed the flowers in the vase and arranged them so they looked aesthetically pleasing. I uncorked the cork so the wine could breathe. I took the lid off the chocolates and placed them on the tray, along with the description of each piece of chocolate that came with each box. I added a candle holder and a lighter to set the mood. 10 minutes later, I saw Joy talking on the phone, giggling at the caller's words. I walked into the living room, dimmed the lights, and turned on the MP3 player to play soft romantic music. She hung up the phone as soon as she saw my silhouette. She looked stunned as the lights dimmed and the music started playing. I stood between her and the coffee table, placing the tray so she couldn't see its contents. I poured the wine and lit the candle. I turned the tray so that the cover of Norman Love was in front of her along with a box of chocolates. The tickets for the play were in my shirt pocket. I stepped back so she could see the tray, and then she asked, "Pete, what's going on, Sam? Hill?" I held out a glass of wine to her when she noticed the chocolates. "Peter, how, why? Oh my God. Norman Love's what's the occasion?" I looked her straight in the eye and said, "Joy, I know we piously honor Friday family nights, but periodically we need to put the rest of the world aside and focus on us to keep things connected and fresh tonight. I want to start doing just that." Cheers. We clinked our glasses together with the proverbial clink and took a sip. Each Joy took one of the decadent, heart-shaped pieces of chocolate and devoured it slowly and sensually. While she savored the treat, I continued. "Tonight is just a precursor to a weekend of romance and reunion. Tomorrow I've hired a limo to take us on a magical journey. First dinner at Lurk Restaurant, and then to the theater to see. I handed her the tickets and added the Phantom of the Opera. Nancy and Rick volunteered to pick up the kids from school and leave them all weekend. The house is at our disposal. We'll be able to reconnect on an emotional, spiritual, and mental level." I reached into my pocket and pulled out $300 in cash. I put them in her left hand, as she was still clutching the tickets in her right. I told her that the money could buy a nice dress, shoes, and sexy lingerie. She almost choked on her chocolate and took a sip of wine, trying not to cough. She put the tickets and money on the table. She lowered her eyes and muttered, "It sounds wonderful," but I said, "But nothing is going to keep us from having a wonderful weekend." Joy finally looked up and just above a whisper said, "Pete, I was planning on going out Friday night with Celeste and the girls from the clinic. I decided I needed some time alone. I hope you'll understand." "No, Joy, I don't understand, and I'll tell you why. First of all, this is the first I'm hearing about this. When were you planning on letting me know about it on your way out the door? Second, during our family night, I felt guilty about letting the kids go but decided that to keep the family together we needed some our time. Not my time. I hired a driver. Tickets for tomorrow's performance. The rest of the tickets are already sold out, and I paid dearly to get this couple from the man who sold them, with a scalp. Because his wife just gave birth and they won't be able to attend, I can't put it off, and why should I? So you can go to a club with a bunch of single women and divorcees instead of spending a romantic weekend with your husband." Joy looked lost and her head dropped to her hands as she pondered her next words. Finally, she looked at me and said, "Peter, I love you and appreciate your gesture. We can still have dinner on Saturday? I just can't disrupt my plans for tomorrow. I need the evening and I deserve it. I'm sorry about the tickets, but you can sell them tomorrow. I promise to give you my full attention for the rest of the weekend." That's when I realized it was over. I grabbed the tickets off the table, poured the rest of the wine over the candle. I grabbed the vase of flowers and threw it into the fireplace. Joy sat in shock as I ran to the bedroom. I grabbed clean work clothes, a pillow, a razor comb, toothbrush, toothpaste, and mouthwash and headed for the spare room. Before she came upstairs, the door wouldn't lock, so I slid the dresser in front of the door since I knew she wouldn't have the strength to move it. I woke up after a restless night of tossing and turning and slept for probably an hour. I took a quick shower in the kids' bathroom and got dressed. I looked at my sleeping angels, regretting my role in their future unhappiness and devastation. I got in my truck and called Edgar. I told him what had happened and took another day off work. Called Big Swed Johansson and asked if he could help me out tonight. I planned to go to the club, and if she did what I realized she was going to do, I would serve her right after committing coitus interruptus. I planned to block her future Lothario with Big Swede as a backup, partly in case the situation got out of hand, but mostly to keep the situation from getting out of hand. Only a fool would take on the Big Swede. And even that fool's group of well-meaning friends would be on the losing end. Fortunately, Big Swede told me he had my back. He hated cheaters. He put a cast on his ex-wife's lover and took on all 4 of her brothers. 3 of them ended up in intensive care, and the 4th was the only sane one. He ran as far and as fast as he could after Big Swede concussed him. I waited outside the house, refusing to go home or answer her calls until she left for her big night out, except she had absolutely no idea how grand the event that evening would turn out to be. I called Big Swede, gave him the location, and watched Celeste pick up my cheating wife. I entered the house and quickly gathered all of my personal belongings. I left the tools in the truck. I grabbed a couple pictures of my kids. I took the coffee mug they gave me for Christmas, as well as 2 pans, a plate, a plastic cup, and 1 set of silverware. I put it all in the clubhouse cab in the back seat and headed out to meet Big Swede. I asked him to observe her and her group from the bar and take a picture of her on camera. I sent him a picture of her with my phone. I asked him to keep me in the loop, especially if she picked up some guy and left the bar with him. Big Swede called about an hour into the evening and told me that she had been there for almost the entire hour, until her friend brought a guy to the table. The guy turned out to be a typical lounge lizard, and they started dancing shortly thereafter. The Swede called me and told me that by the 2nd hour, he was buying drinks and she was devouring them as fast as they came. The more she drank, the more she let this guy touch her. What she was touching would definitely fail the husband test. They started making out on the dance floor. It was already 11 p.m. when Swede called and said she was heading out the side door to the parking lot. I asked him to meet me and use the same exit. I watched as she and the jerk came out of the side door and headed toward an older Cadillac deal, a real old school Pin Mobile. They climbed into the back seat. I put on my leather driving gloves and pulled a 21-in baton with an Asper protector clip from an unopened box. A trucker friend had bought it for me on a trip to Georgia. I took the divorce papers and put them in my jacket pocket. I found Big Swede and asked him to follow me with a camera to film what was going on. He hid behind the car next to the, holding the camera at the ready and ready to pounce if necessary. The camera record's in low light, and he left the interior light on so he could see the prize contender. She noticed nothing but pleasure. I walked over to the dimly lit spot where the A had parked. I watched while Big Swede filmed with a zoom lens through the window. As the Korean undressed my wife, he kissed her and she kissed him back. I can't wait any longer. I've been craving this monster since the first time, so come on, big boy. As he got ready to do it again, I slid the ASP 21 inches and kicked out the eye window, sending shards of safety glass at the WBE lovers. The boy swung the door open and climbed out of the car, standing in front of me and shouting profanities. Joy lay paralyzed with fear, eyes closed, covered by the shards of window glass. I was sick of putting up with this man usurping my wife, and I quickly brought the full force of my 21-in pistol down on him on the rise. I gave his balls a quick tap and a taste of the potential of my ASP. I giggled as I watched him collapse on the dirty, urine-stained sidewalk. He was crying like a little baby. I looked back at the insides of his Detroit Chariot and saw my loving wife's eyes open and wide as saucers. I asked Big Swede to lean on the hood of the car next to the Cadillac, and he pointed. Inside the vehicle, I reached into my pocket, tossed her the divorce papers, and yelled, "You get it, you cheating." I checked that Mr. Slick was still lying on the ground and hadn't decided to become a frog. He was still whimpering completely, immersed in the world of pain he had invented for himself while he cheated on his wife. I noticed the wedding ring on his left hand. I folded my trusty 21-in hardened carbon fiber knife and strapped it to my belt. I threw the C note at the she outside the window and walked away. She started calling before I even got to the Big Swede, and I could hear her yelling for me to stop and wait, while she hurriedly got dressed and followed me. As I was about to approach the door of my truck, I heard her yell, "Please, Peter, I can explain everything. Please forgive me." I took the second packet of documents from the truck. I took my camera from Big Swede and found her. "Friend Celeste," I shouted. "Thank you for ruining my marriage. You served yourself, you narcissistic. Make sure you get her home. She's in no condition." "Damn you to hell." I walked out the front door just as a half-naked Joy ran through the club. Trying to corner me, I barely managed to break free, but I watched as tire smoke enveloped the door I was married to, and she collapsed onto the same urine-stained sidewalk strewn with puddles of vomit and discarded cigarette butts I threw her and my marriage into the rearview mirror and never looked back. I headed to my motel and pulled out a bottle of Mr. John Daniel's Old No. 7, sour mashed potatoes for a sour life, and for a wife it seemed fitting. I drank myself into a drunken stupor and then passed out in full attire when I woke up hungover. I discovered that there were about 2 fingers of amber gold left in the bottle, sharpened with charcoal. So before swallowing 2 painkiller pills and hopping in the shower, I did a little combing of my hair. An hour later, I was already feeling half-human. I got dressed and headed out for breakfast and a much-needed couple cups of black coffee. I was in the diner at the truck stop waiting for a plate of corn, beef hash, eggs, and bacon and juice. When I checked my messages, my inbox was full. 37 calls from Joy, 12 from that Celeste, 20 from my parents, 12 from Edgar, and 1 from Big Swed, who was wondering if I was okay and what happened after. He left after drinking 2 mugs of coffee. I called Edgar to let him know I was alive and planned to go to work on Monday. In between eating hash, I called the Big Swed and told him everything, since I figured I owed him for his help. I finished eating, and while my stomach contemplated whether to accept the guests willingly or throw them out with fury, I called Mom and Dad. I explained what had happened and got off the phone, promising to come back later. I called Nancy, brought her up to speed, and asked if she could keep the kids away from Joy until I had a chance to talk to them. I asked her to take them to the zoo at my expense and meet me at Chuck E. Cheese's at 3:30 p.m. She promised she would do that. I listened to some of the messages Joy had left, and it was clear to me that she was truly broken. She professed her love, confessed her profound stupidity and infidelity, and held out hope that we could get past her injustice. If I agreed to talk to her, she sincerely apologized for the pain and suffering she had caused me. I knew I had to meet her at least once before I could cut her out of my life. Unfortunately, she will always be the mother of my children, but that is entirely up to me, since I asked that to marry me myself. However, my children are the only blessing from my union with Joy, so I can't blame myself too much in that regard. I can't imagine a world they aren't a part of that. Celeste left messages dripping evil and vile poisonous blood, promising to ruin me and have me tried and quartered. I repaid her kindness with a kind gesture by visiting both doctors at the clinic and telling them what had happened, and that Celeste was the root of the problem, and even enticed patients to join her DPRCV'd Balia. She was discreetly, if not politely, suspended one night while she was promiscuous. The foundation of her house collapsed, and the county building inspector declared it uninhabitable. No sooner had work begun to rebuild the foundation than the house exploded in a fireball due to a natural gas leak caused by a lit light bulb on an old model gas stove. She filed a claim with her homeowner's insurance. The fire inspector said the explosion was arson, and she was wanted on suspicion of arson and insurance fraud. The gas line on the stove was punctured. No job, no home, no insurance payout, and the threat of arrest in a criminal case all proved to be too much. I heard she'd snuck out of town one night. I chuckled, remembering her empty threats of going broke, being physically assaulted, or something worse. Even though Celeste was gone, she was a highly sought after. She left many lounge lizards to fend for themselves on Friday nights, and the incident with Joy had forced most of the wives she hired for her fuckfests to stay home for fear of losing their marriages. Thus, about 2 weeks ago, 3 of the regulars, led by the Guy, who slept with my wife, decided they were in for retribution. Unfortunately for the 4 ex-lovers turned vigilantes, they decided to attack me one fine evening when I went out for a beer with the Big Swed with the help of hammers, which he calls fists, in my ASP. We fought off the attackers, leaving them thoroughly battered and in need of serious medical attention. That night, before the celebration began, Big Swed told me that he had been at the club where I was performing. Turns out that the who seriously tried to bed my wife ended up needing surgery on his buddy. One of the women went over to spank and tickle him, but But he said it might take a few more surgeries before he would dare to do such a thing, but like my ex-wife, he hasn't given up hope that one day he will rise above his affliction, just as she believed we would stay married. Ah, what is life without hope? Even if it is nothing but pipe dreams. I had a confrontation with Joy. She tried in vain to explain everything. I replied that she had willingly and purposely chosen lust over love, and that love had been confessed and moved on that fateful Thursday and spat upon and denigrated on that ill-fated Friday. All that remained was a vile contempt, a complete and all-consuming hatred, so vile as if acid had dissolved my heart and soul and left behind a cold, empty shell of a man. I told her I knew when she and that she calls a friend made me a topic of discussion on the phone as she plotted her betrayal. Her humiliation, ridicule, and repetition of my alleged shortcomings not only went unheeded, but my so-called loving and faithful wife joined in wholeheartedly. The humiliation of rejecting my sincere and heartfelt proposals, made on that fateful Thursday, with the hope that love and fidelity would prevail over lust and illicit sex. But it was not meant to be. The question is not why I won't try to fix the relationship and be with you, but why you would want to be with me, given the vile and grating things you either said or basically agreed to from the mouth of a relative stranger. So you are free to sleep with whoever you want, whenever you want. Just not in this house where my children live. If my children find out about your sordid lifestyle, I will sue for custody. I have the tape, and I will be vigilant to make sure your secret life never touches my children. If you do not agree to this stipulation in your divorce, I will take the gloves off and fight for my children, and I will make sure they are protected. So it is in your best interest to sign the papers immediately. And without argument, with those words, I walked out the front door toward the future. She believed I had tricked her and decided to challenge me to a conversation. That Friday night our electrician installed cameras in the house. I soon learned that she and her buddy from work had come to the house and that Bethany had been awakened by the sounds her mother and her partner were making in a fit of passion, and she went to see why her mother was screaming and witnessed what she thought was a man violently attacking her mother. We taught her how to call 911 for help and brought the police, who kicked down our front door to apprehend the attacker and discovered what they had actually done. The police later called me to let me know that my daughter was in shock and distraught. I picked up my children and took them to my sister's house. I later got a copy of the police report from my attorney. Joy tried to downplay and explain everything, but I had had enough. She could find no excuse for her behavior. Armed with my daughter's stories, which she relayed to her therapist, the police report, and a videotape of the incident, I went to court and demanded full custody. Joy and her attorney fought, but he knew she would never win. The next morning, I was awarded full custody and supervised visits to be reviewed in 6 months. This was done through the recommendations of Dr. Karen, Bethany's therapist. It took 18 months before the therapist agreed to allow her to see the children. Our divorce was contentious and messy, as I admitted to the case videotapes of her fun night and the night she traumatized my daughter. I made sure that all of our family and friends received extended pornography videos of my soon-to-be ex-wife showing off her assets, including her body. With my comments, she quickly became pariah. However, the guys had been warned. I worked hard to raise my children. Bethany continued treatment for 3 and 2 years. JN was relieved of the nightmares generated by what Bethany had witnessed. She wet her bed for 18 months during that time. Dr. Karen Silverstein seemed like a warm, compassionate, and gentle soul. She was intelligent, beautiful, and sexy. I visited her regularly to keep abreast of Bethany's treatment and progress. I found her to be a top-notch professional and an engaging conversationalist. One evening, we went out for coffee. After her regular visit, Karen told me that she had gotten divorced because she found she was unable to have children, and her husband had left her. She adored children and felt abandoned at the worst possible time in her personal life. However, she persevered and dedicated her life to helping children like Bethany overcome trauma and tragedy. I realized later that I fell in love that night at Beanie Roast over a double mocha latte and a cafe Americano. When therapy ended, I realized that I would likely never see the good doctor again. The thought of that struck me and left a huge void inside. I thought back to that fateful night at the goose roast and came to a realization. Suddenly, I felt a desperate impulse to act on my feelings and clumsily asked her out over the next few months. As we grew closer, we became attached to each other heart and soul. He married her without verification while we waited, and decided to share our physical connection on our wedding night, to make it memorable and special. It was magical and mystical, and I realized that I had truly found my soulmate. When Karen and I decided to get married, I sold the house and we bought another in the same school district I wanted to get rid of. The haunting memories of living with Joy, and she needed the money after she got her share. She left town. She visited the kids regularly, but couldn't live under the scrutiny. A few years after our divorce, Joy wrote me a sincere letter, and Karen helped me reconcile with the past. So by the time I read her letter, it was much easier for me to forgive and let go of the past than to keep pouring mud on it, in hopes that it would stay buried that way. This is Joy's story, and when she is ready, she will share it with all of you. As I stood outside that dimly lit parking lot, facing the devastating truth of my wife's choices, I knew my life was forever altered. But this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. What would you do if you caught your partner red-handed, betraying everything you built together? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more gripping tales of love, loss, and resilience. Your voice matters, and I can't wait to hear from you.